Cyberpunk 2077 was basically the Hindenburg of video games when it came out. It was a huge disaster that everybody talked about due to its lack of precedent and the severity of the images that were produced about it. But somehow, several years later, it is a well-liked and respected game with very positive reviews, both recently and overall on Steam. How did that happen? Hi folks, it's Falcon, and today on gameranx, how Cyberpunk 2077 did the impossible. So, back before this game came out, the hype was out of control. The expectations for CD Projekt Red's newest game were through the roof, and why would they not be through the roof? These guys knocked it out of the park with The Witcher 3, and Cyberpunk was going to be their most ambitious game yet. To say that people were excited would be a massive understatement. Players were frothing at the mouth to see this thing. The developers had been really tight-lipped about what was actually in the game, leading to a lot of rampant speculation among the fan base. Like, when devs don't set expectations, especially for games like this, then fans are going to set their own. And when that happens, even the best games need to beware, and Cyberpunk 2077, at least at release, was not one of the best games. It was not even, technically speaking, a good game, a complete game. A game in a condition that could be acceptably released, even in an era where people are used to games launching in a state and getting patched. The game released on December 10th, 2020, to mostly positive reviews. Some reviewers went so far as to call it a contender for the best game ever made, like this infamous review from Windows Central, but that positivity would not last. Players who actually got the final product were not happy. The game was a buggy mess and looked terrible on consoles, and it wasn't actually all that much better on PC. The game was in many ways just flat out broken at launch, extremely rough around the edges. This was not the game that CD Projekt Red had promised us, and players weren't just disappointed, they were angry, and controversies endlessly swirled around this game. Investors sued, consumers put together a class action lawsuit claiming false advertising, Sony literally pulled the game from digital sales for a while, and actually Xbox put a giant warning on the game's store page warning players about the game's buggy state. CD Projekt Red had data stolen and ransomed. A reviewer actually suffered a seizure from watching one of the brain dance sequences in the game. There was actually originally no epilepsy warning in the game, which is kind of shocking because those are not new. The whole thing was just bad news on top of bad news on top of bad news. The inevitable Jason Schreier expose painted a picture of a studio in crisis. In those first few months after the game came out, it seemed like there was no future for the company or the game. It was just one disaster after another. Sure, they promised to do right and make updates to the game, but how often do developers follow through on that? Consumer expectations are low for this kind of a thing, and for a reason. Somebody who would develop and release a game in this state for that price without saying anything, literally just allowing a big hype train to sell millions of copies of their game, it doesn't seem honest, and, it's happened a lot of times before. And it took a while, but now, just about 3 years after launch, I think we can safely say they managed to do the impossible. They took a game with a reputation that was unsalvageable and turned it around. For a long time, Cyberpunk was the punching bag of the gaming media, the easiest of easy targets, and you can see it anywhere. Look up any random listicle from about 2021, and you'll see the writer include a catty dig at the game's expense because it was a safe joke to make. And this includes your old pal Falcon the Game Bird and everybody else at gameranx. I'm not saying that to say that we were wrong. In fact, it deserved it. It was generally assumed to be a failure because of how bad it was. Thankfully, looking back, they were actually serious about fixing the game, but it did take a while because, it was like that. It was, like that. Like what you can see on the screen right now. That's not like fix it in a couple of days broken. A lot of other publishers and developers wouldn't even bother. They would just write the game off and move on to their next project, hoping that it turns out better. But CD Projekt Red knew that there was more than that writing on this. They recognized that if they were going to remain a successful company, they needed to turn this game around and restore consumer trust in their brand. It's a playback they've gone back to many times, actually, but the stakes have never been this high. Like, if you remember the original Witcher game when it came out back in 2007, to call it rough would be a kind way of putting it. It wasn't the mess that Cyberpunk was at release, but it was pretty bad, and the translation was awkward as hell. So in 2008, 1 year later, they revamped the game with Witcher Enhanced Edition, which fixed a lot of issues that the players had with a free update and did a lot to make the game better, and that translated to improved sales. If they hadn't done that, they wouldn't have been able to make Witcher 2, and certainly not Witcher 3, which, by the way, Witcher 3 also had issues at release. From bugs to a downgrading scandal. I would not say it caused the kind of controversy that Cyberpunk 2077 did. Honestly, not even the controversy that Witcher 1 caused, which, I mean, pound for pound was actually something. It's not like Witcher was as big a game as Cyberpunk 2077, so not as many people were paying attention, but this isn't CD Projekt Red's first revamp rodeo is what I'm saying. Now, the thing about Cyberpunk 2077 is that while the zeitgeist around the game was extremely negative in 2020, it did still have its fans. With a game this size, it's just inevitable that among the haters, there are also going to be defenders. It's highly anticipated. People have both emotionally and monetarily invested time and money into it, and also it isn't as though it's not an attempt at something. It's easy to say that the complaining around the game was hyperbolic at the time, because some was. That's just inevitable when you get into games discourse, but the game had serious problems too. Now, the state of Cyberpunk 2077 on consoles was abysmal. There's no way around it. The decision to release the game for PS4 and Xbox One without a next-gen update was a boneheaded move. Like, they should have just delayed it. On PS4, the game was horribly ugly at times, and the bugs were non-stop. Low-res textures were very common. There was constant stuttering. Character models would get screwed up. Cutscenes would play wrong. You couldn't play the game for more than 2 minutes without encountering a visual bug of some kind. Gameplay also was seen as a disappointment. The shooting was solid, but the skill tree was confusing and unsatisfying. The enemy AI was just worthless, plain bad, crap. Like, just crap, honestly. Many open world features people have come to expect also just weren't there at launch. The world felt lifeless because there was no real reactivity. There was barely any police response at times. The world was stuffed with boring points of interest without much to do of any substance, and the armor system made it so that everybody had to dress like a clown. Driving wasn't a lot of fun either. Cars were stiff to control, and they were buggy just like everything else. It was a game that didn't seem to know what its strengths were, so everything gameplay related just felt off. Now, there was a solid core, at very least. Night City was one of the best designed open world cities ever, and each district just felt totally unique and visually interesting. The story was solid as well, even if there were definitely too many scenes of people just talking without a lot else going on. It was a game that could conceivably be fixed, but it took a long time. The game saw a lot of small updates and bug fixes for the first few months, but the first major overhaul patch took way longer to come out. Like, the game didn't start seeing significant improvements until 2022. In February, they put out the next-gen upgrade on consoles that gave the game enhanced graphics, faster loading times, and a much more stable frame rate. It was free, and obviously it should have been. And the response, at least what I saw, was tepidly positive, which is saying a lot, actually. It sounds like I'm saying very little, but when you talk about a game that was as constantly ripped on as Cyberpunk 2077, saying that the response to something related to it was tepidly positive is actually major. But even so, that wasn't really what changed the attitude around the game. Something entirely different did. Originally announced back in June 2020, months before the final game of Cyberpunk even came out, Edgerunners, a collaboration between CD Projekt and Studio Trigger, the anime studio responsible for stuff like Little Witch Academia, SSS Gridman, Promare, Kill la Kill, the list goes on. The show didn't even come out until mid-2022, but it ended up being perfect timing for the developers because it came out when opinions were just starting to turn. So there was actually some real interest in this Netflix adaptation, and yeah, Studio Trigger can be kind of hit or miss with their shows, but this one was a hit. It got great reviews all around and an overall positive audience reception, and a lot of people consider it one of the best video game adaptations of all time. And I don't think it can be understated just how much this show did for Cyberpunk 2077. Like, it turned a lot of people around on the game and on the setting. It's a solid anime. Like, it's actually really good and does a whole lot to expand the setting. And as far as video game media goes, we're used to like good games getting bad adaptions, and this was a huge anomaly. A game that people knew as bad got a great adaptation, and it showed the things about the game that were good. And again, in the meantime, CD Projekt Red had worked on making the game itself good. It did still have its problems, but it was getting better. The same year, September 6, 2022, CD Projekt Red announced their biggest addition to the game yet, an expansion titled Phantom Liberty. And momentum was on their side, but this was going to be the true make it or break it point for the game. These guys are known for some of the best DLC in the business. Like the add-ons for Witcher 3 had excellent stories, they're huge, and they were cheap. It kind of seemed impossible that they'd be able to match that quality, but they did. Somehow, the madmen did it. Days before that expansion came out, they released the highly anticipated patch 2.0, which overhauled many main aspects of the game. There was an actual wanted level system, police can hunt you, the skill tree is remade from the ground up and becomes much more interesting. How Chrome works was completely changed and also more interesting. Now you can equip a ton of cyberware, but there's a limit depending on your level. Clothing no longer affects armor, you can just wear whatever you want, no more mix and match clown outfits. You're actually allowed to just like try to curate yourself a cool character. You know, what role-playing generally is about. The AI was upgraded, so it's more aggressive, it's more interesting to fight. Net running is more viable, and also just better. Loot's more rare, and also more interesting. I mean, we could just keep repeating that things that could have been interesting became interesting, but enemies scale to your level. The list kind of, it keeps going. In some games, even massive changelogs like this one don't actually make the game feel that different, but for Cyberpunk, it feels like a new game, a better game. With 2.0, the devs looked at the game and really seemed to think about what people like about the game and what they were left wanting. Character building feels more important and interesting with 2.0, and in general, the game is just a lot more fun to actually play, which sounds like an obvious thing, make the game more fun, but I mean, that's easier said than done, is it not? But the thing about 2.0 is that it was completely free. They fulfilled their promise of fixing the game, and with Phantom Liberty, they went above and beyond. If there's any reason to play Cyberpunk, it's actually for Phantom Liberty, which is not just a fantastic expansion, it's easily in the running for the best game of the year. In a year as stacked as 2023, that is high praise. Any issues the game originally had are just gone. Its story is fantastically paced, there's no dry scenes of exposition anymore, you're always going around doing something new, getting into other high-stakes situations or fighting some new enemy. It's both more exciting than the main game and more emotionally gripping. Idris Elba is fantastic as Solomon Reed, and Keanu Reeves steps it up as Johnny Silverhand. He's good in the regular game, but he's even better here. Like, he's got some really affecting scenes in this expansion. It's got some great set piece moments and missions as well. I'd almost describe it as the best Call of Duty campaign Activision never made, because the story is so fast-paced and exciting, but that's selling Phantom Liberty short. Yeah, it's not the cheapest, it's $30 on top of the base game price, but in my opinion, the DLC makes the game so much more worth it. Even the side missions are great. It's set in a different district, it's called Dogtown. It's a section of the city that's been taken over by the mercenary company Barghest. The expansion, it just feels completely different from the standard game. Rather than your standard Cyberpunk story about evil corporations, Phantom Liberty is more about the politics of the setting and revolves around themes of duty, patriotism, and freedom. It's a dense narrative with a lot going on, and it pulls some of the most impressive tricks I've ever seen in a game by having two completely different ending missions depending on what decision you make. Both of these missions are absolutely fantastic and are worth experiencing regardless of what direction you want to take the story. They're as different as can be, while both being fully featured, story-heavy segments. They really make it feel like your choices matter in this one, and that's saying a lot. What can happen in the end can change a lot, and they all feel like the true ending, if you get what I mean. There isn't corner cutting with this stuff, it's very impressive. The DLC starts off with your character being promised a solution to their problem, the problem they still have at the end of the damn main game, and the DLC actually ties into the main game pretty seamlessly in that way, and in the end, you fulfill your end of the bargain and actually get what you want. The DLC includes an entirely new ending for the base game, and it's one of the best endings I've ever seen in a game, no joke. You'd think that's where they'd stop, but they had a little bit more gas in the tank. In what is being described as the last major update to the game, patch 2.1 will finally make it possible to ride the metro system, something people have been complaining about for years. You can even ride it in real time if you want. You know how the game sold like 20 million units back in 2022? Post Phantom Liberty, you can bump that up to 25 million. All from the expansion and the 2.0 update. It took a while, but they finally pulled it off. The game is in a significantly better state now, and people seem overall happy with it. It's still not perfect, it's not the GTA, but in the future, some people wanted it to be back in 2020, but now some of the initial anger about the game has fallen into a memory hole. It's not hard to look back at a lot of the response from a few years ago and see it as overblown, a symptom of the gaming community's love of catastrophizing, but the game really did have a ton of problems back when it came out, and the company's practices leading up to the game's release were at very least questionable, possibly deceptive. Those investors that sued them actually got a payout of $1.85 million, which is a lot of money, although compared to the amount of money that the game brought in, probably not a lot of money. But even going beyond that, when it came to reviews, why were they that positive? What was going on there? It wasn't just the usual complaining that any highly anticipated game gets. There was fire with the smoke. It wasn't pretend. But to the developers' credit, they did manage to take that feedback and make a lot of positive changes to the game. It took nearly 3 years to do it, but they managed to make Cyberpunk 2077, which was the laughingstock of the gaming industry for quite a while, into a great game. That's all for today. Leave us a comment, let us know what you think. If you like this video, click like. If you're not subscribed, now's a great time to do so. We upload brand new videos every day of the week, and the best way to see them first is, of course, a subscription. So click subscribe. Don't forget to enable notifications, and as always, we thank you very much for watching this video. I'm Falcon. You can follow me on Twitter at Falcon the Hero, and we'll see you next time right here on gameranx.